wow, that one sentence, right? It launched one of the most influential and, yeah, controversial ideas in the history of policing. It's an idea that it feels right, doesn't it? But the real story? Oh, it's way more complicated than that.
So today we're diving deep into the broken windows theory. We're going to unpack this seemingly simple idea that literally reshaped cities. And then we're going to get into the really tough criticisms that ask the big question, did it actually work?
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the experiment that kicked this whole thing off. Then we'll break down the main argument itself. After that, we're taking a trip to New York City to see the theory in action before we really dig into the major criticisms and figure out, what's its legacy today. All right, let's get right into it. And you might be surprised to hear that this theory, well, it didn't actually start with a broken window. It all began with a pretty wild experiment and a couple of abandoned cars. So back in 1969, the psychologist Philip Zimbardo does this thing. He leaves one car in a neighborhood in the Bronx and another one in super affluent Palo Alto, California. And what happened? It was just dramatic. The car in the Bronx, it was attacked in minutes, totally stripped for parts within 24 hours. But the car in Palo Alto, it just sat there, completely untouched for over a week. So the big takeaway seemed to be that these visible signs of neglect, like an abandoned car, they're almost like an open invitation for more destruction. Okay, so you have this really interesting observation about a car, but how does that become a massive, full-blown theory of crime prevention? I mean, a theory that would go on to reshape policing for decades to come. Well, flash forward to 1982. Two social scientists, James Q. Wilson and George Kelling, they take that idea and they run with it. They argue that all these small, visible signs of disorder, we're talking graffiti, trash on the street, or, a single broken window, they all send out a powerful signal. And that signal says, hey, nobody's in charge here, no one cares. It suggests that breaking the rules, well, it's free. And that can open the door for much, much more serious crimes down the line. The theory lays out this whole chain reaction, right? It's like a set of dominoes. It all starts with that visible disorder. Step 1, that makes people who live there feel scared. Step 2, so what do? The law-abiding citizens, they retreat. They stop using public spaces. That's step 3. And that withdrawal, it creates a vacuum. It creates the perfect environment for serious crime to move in and take over. Step 4, boom, 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 a domino effect. So this is a pretty compelling idea in an academic paper, right? But how does it jump from the page and onto the streets? Well, it was famously put to the test in New York City in what became one of the biggest policing experiments of the entire 20th century. And this idea caught on fast, incredibly fast. In 1990, a guy named William Bratton starts using it on the subway system. He's cracking down on graffiti, people jumping the turnstiles, all that stuff. And then, just 4 years later, he's the new police commissioner for Mayor Rudy Giuliani, and he takes the whole strategy citywide. And this was a huge shift in policing. The focus was now on aggressively going after these so-called quality of life offenses. The thinking was, look, if we stop the small stuff, the public drinking, the loitering, we send a powerful message that disorder of any kind won't be tolerated. And the hope was that this would stop that whole slide into more serious crime before it even started. And at first, the people behind it were claiming it was a massive success. George Kelling, one of the original authors, he himself claimed that this new policing style prevented, get this, over 60,000 violent crimes in New York City. That is a staggering number. It really looked like the theory was a slam dunk. But you knew there was a but coming, right? As crime rates dropped, more and more critics started speaking up, and they were all asking this one crucial question. Did broken windows policing cause the crime drop, or was it just happening at the same time? So the first big challenge was all about effectiveness. Let's cut to the chase. Did going after small-time offenses actually do anything to stop serious crime? So you had the supporters saying, see, it works. But the critics were saying, hold on a second, let's zoom out. Turns out crime was already going down all across the country in the 90s, even in cities that weren't doing any broken windows policing. They argued that other bigger things were happening, like a great economy and the end of the crack cocaine epidemic. And this might be the biggest bombshell of all. The most powerful piece of evidence against the strategy, it came from the NYPD itself. In 2016, their own inspector general put out a report. And the conclusion? Targeting these quality of life offenses had, and I'm quoting here, no measurable effect on the felony crime rate. Wow.
So that brings us to the second and, maybe even more serious criticism. It wasn't just about whether the policy worked, it was about whether the policy was fair. Here's the problem. According to critics, the word disorder is totally subjective. I mean, think about it. What one person calls disorderly, another person might just call a lively neighborhood. This vagueness gives police a ton of power to decide what's what. And that has led to some really serious accusations that the policy ends up targeting minority and low-income communities, that it basically makes being poor a crime, and that it opened the door for controversial tactics like stop and frisk. Okay, so here we are decades later, after all the debate, all the implementation. Where does that leave the broken windows theory today? Well, its legacy is complicated. It's really a tale of two very different outcomes. And this is maybe the most important thing to understand. We really have to pull these two things apart. On one hand, you've got the controversial policing strategy, which is slammed for being aggressive and biased. But on the other hand, you have the core idea, the simple insight that clean, well-maintained places matter. And that idea has inspired some amazing, positive, community-led projects. And this suggests a totally different path forward. Forget the police crackdowns for a second. What happens when communities start fixing the windows themselves? Well, in Chicago, people turned empty, trash-filled lots into community gardens. In Philadelphia, a project to simply repair abandoned buildings was linked to an incredible 39% drop in gun violence. It's about building up the good stuff, the parks, the libraries, the safe community spaces, and seeing real positive results. So that leaves us with one big question to chew on. The whole story of broken windows really forces us to ask ourselves, what makes a neighborhood truly safe? Does real order come from aggressive enforcement pushing down from the top? Or does it come from investment, care, and community building rising up from the ground?